I was sitting in the cardiologist's waiting room staring at a crooked poster about heart health when my phone lit up with Sophie's name. My daughter-in-law never called me unless she needed something, usually a favor, never a conversation. I answered with a polite hello, and her voice sliced through the air like an icy wind. "I signed the papers, Linda. Your mountain cabin is gone, sold. We needed the money." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The cabin Benjamin built with his own hands, gone. But then I surprised myself. Instead of crying, I smiled. Because Sophie had no idea who truly owned it. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee, an odd comfort after all these months of feeling adrift. The old woman sitting opposite me flipped through a magazine without really looking at it. A TV in the corner played a muted commercial about prescription medications, and I, Linda Hale, nearly 70 years old and newly widowed, sat quietly with a purse full of tissues and peppermint candies, trying to keep my heart steady. But nothing prepared me for the coldness in Sophie's voice that morning. I lowered the phone from my ear, feeling a strange stillness wash over me. Not the trembling grief I expected, not even anger, just clarity. A clarity I hadn't felt since the morning my husband Benjamin collapsed right at our kitchen sink, the coffee pot still warm beside him. "Ma'am, are you all right?" a nurse asked gently as she passed. "I'm fine," I said, and to my own surprise, I truly meant it. Sophie thought she had taken everything from me, but she didn't know half the story. I slipped my phone back into my bag, my fingers brushing the soft leather of Benjamin's old wallet. It still smelled like him cedar tobacco, a hint of motor oil. He'd carried it for 35 years, and after he passed, I held onto it like a lifeline. Inside that wallet, tucked behind a faded photo of us taken in the late 70s, was a tiny brass key attached to a handwritten note I had ignored for months. "For when you finally need it, Ben." Back then, I didn't understand what he meant. Today, Sophie had just given me the answer. I leaned back into the stiff green plastic chair and closed my eyes. Thoughts drifted like snow over the memory of our mountain cabin. God, that place. The one spot on earth where Benjamin and I felt like ourselves again, no matter how hard the world pushed. He carved the porch railings with his own hands, shaping every curve and knot. He built the stone fireplace rock by rock, calling it his monument to stubbornness. And the cabin looked out over a ridge so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat. We spent every anniversary up there, every fall, every winter when the snow got high enough to bury our boots. It wasn't just a cabin, it was our love story nailed into old timber and pine. And Sophie, she sold it with one signature. My daughter-in-law always saw it as a waste of equity, as she liked to phrase it. She hated driving up the mountain, too cold, too rustic, too old-fashioned, her words, not mine. When Mark, my son, married her, I tried to welcome her, I truly did. But she carried ambition like a shield and money like a compass. She pushed Mark into a lifestyle they couldn't afford and blamed everyone but herself when the bills piled up. Still, I never imagined she would do something this bold, this cruel. I opened my eyes again as the doctor called my name. The appointment was routine. I had been going through the motions ever since Benjamin passed. Tests, medications, blood pressure checks. I nodded and smiled at the doctor, hearing little of what he said about my health. My mind kept circling back to Sophie, to the cabin, to the unsettling calm inside me. Maybe it was the phone call. Maybe it was the final straw after a year of loneliness. Maybe it was Benjamin's little brass key in my purse. But as I walked out of the clinic, I understood something. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. Outside, the autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves and exhaust from the city buses. I wrapped my cardigan tighter and stepped to the curb. My car was gone now. Sophie had sold that too, apparently. So I waited for the bus like I used to when I was a young woman visiting my mother in the nursing home. Funny how life circles back. The bus arrived with a hiss, and I climbed aboard, dropping coins into the metal tray. I sat by the window, watching the city drift by, coffee shops, old houses, people rushing with their own worries. No one knew what had just happened to me, and for the first time, that anonymity felt like power. As the bus rocked gently over cracks in the road, my mind drifted back to Benjamin. 3 days before he died, he handed me a manila envelope and said, "Put this away for later. Don't open it yet." I had nodded numb from caregiving and fear, never imagining later would come so soon. After the funeral, grief swallowed everything and I forgot about it entirely. Until now. I reached my stop and stepped off the bus. My small, modest house welcomed me with its peeling paint and the creak of porch boards. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. I went straight to my bedroom, opened the dresser drawer, pulled out the envelope. My hands trembled not from age, but from anticipation. The envelope felt heavy, thicker than I remembered. As I held it, a strange calm settled over me again. Sophie believed she had won, that she had stripped me of everything I cared about. But she didn't know Benjamin. She never knew how he planned, how he prepared, how he protected. I sat on the edge of the bed we shared for almost 50 years, sunlight slanting through the curtains, dust floating like tiny memories in the air. I slid my finger beneath the flap and opened the envelope. And what I found inside changed the entire story. Everything Sophie thought she took, everything she believed she controlled, rested in my hands now. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt alive. The envelope lay open on my lap, its contents fanned out like the wings of some long sleeping creature, finally stirred awake. I didn't touch anything at first. I simply stared. Legal documents, property deeds, faded receipts, a thick folder stamped with the name Hale Timber and Trust. And on top of it all, a handwritten letter in Benjamin's neat, disciplined script, every loop and line unmistakably his. My breath caught. For months, I had avoided opening this, too afraid of what it might hold, too shattered to handle anything beyond my next cup of tea. But now I felt an urgency, a sense that everything was shifting beneath my feet. Sophie's phone call had cracked something open, not just anger or grief, but clarity, a purpose. Benjamin always knew how to reach me, even from beyond the grave. Before I dared unfold his letter, my eyes drifted around the room. Our room. The quilt I stitched in my 40s still sat neatly at the foot of the bed. His boots remained in the closet laces tucked inside just the way he left them. His aftershave lingered faintly in the air, a ghostly hint of cedar and peppermint. It made my heart ache, but for the first time in many months, the ache didn't hollow me out. It steadied me. I lifted the letter. My dearest Linda. That alone made me press the paper to my chest and close my eyes for a moment. I could almost hear him saying it, gentle, steady, warm. Benjamin wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, he meant every syllable. If you're reading this, then I'm no longer beside you. I swallowed hard and kept reading. I know you, Lynn. I know you would never think to protect yourself first. You've always believed people mean well even when they don't. Even when they take advantage. My hands trembled slightly. He knew. Of course he knew. He'd seen the way Sophie talked over me at family dinners, the way she dismissed my opinions, as outdated the way she squeezed Mark's arm when she wanted him to shut me down. Benjamin saw everything, and he planned for it. Before my last surgery, I created Hale Timber and Trust. It holds assets you don't know about yet, properties, accounts, and the cabin. I put it under the company because I knew someone might try to pressure you or manipulate you. A chill danced down my spine. You are the sole owner, Linda, only you. The words blurred with tears, but I brushed them away. I needed to focus. If anyone ever tries to take what we built, this envelope will show you exactly where you stand. Stronger than you believe. I love you always. Ben. I sat frozen, his words sinking into the deepest parts of me. All this time while I thought I was alone, drowning in grief. Benjamin had already built a lifeboat. He had trusted me to find it when I needed it most, when I felt most powerless. And today was that day. I unfolded the deeds. There it was. In black and white, the mountain cabin belonged not to me personally, but to Hale Timber and Trust. And I owned Hale Timber and Trust. Sophie's signature, no matter how confident or spiteful, meant absolutely nothing. It was illegal, fraudulent, void. A small, almost wicked smile tugged at my lips. "Oh, Benjamin," I whispered, "you always were smarter than the rest of us." For a moment, I allowed myself to simply breathe, letting the truth settle. Then I carefully placed the letter back in the envelope and wiped the dust from the folder. The house was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. The ticking clock on the nightstand suddenly sounded purposeful, not lonely. Time wasn't slipping away. Time was finally aligning. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used since Benjamin's funeral. "Caldwell Law Offices, this is Marcia." "Hello, sweetheart," I said softly. "This is Linda Hale. I need to speak with Mr. Caldwell. It's urgent." Her voice warmed. "Mrs. Hale, one moment. I'll put you through." A click, a short pause, and then his familiar, gravelly tone. "Linda, are you all right?" "I am," I said truthfully for the first time in a long while, "but I have a situation, and I think you're the only one who can help me. Tell me everything." I did. Every word, every detail of Sophie's call, every paper in the envelope. Caldwell didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he exhaled sharply. "Well, he said your daughter-in-law is in a very precarious position. Good thing you called me first." "What happens now?" I asked. "We'll take care of it. Quietly. Quiet is smart. Quiet is strategic. And judging by what your husband prepared, quiet is exactly what he wanted." He paused. "Do you want me to contact Sophie or Mark?" "No," I said firmly, "not yet." A silence settled between us, the respectful kind. "You're planning something, aren't you?" Caldwell asked. "I'm planning," I answered, "simply to watch, and to learn who they are when they think they've won." He chuckled softly. "Benjamin always said you were the calm before the storm." That made me smile. He knew me well. "We'll start the process immediately. I'll send you the full report by tomorrow." "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell." Always Linda. When I hung up, the weight that had been crushing my chest for months felt lighter, as if Benjamin himself had placed his hands on my shoulders and whispered, "You're not done yet, Lynn. You're stronger than you think." I walked slowly to the kitchen, made myself tea, and sat at the table where Benjamin used to read the newspaper. Sunlight pooled across the wood, warm and gentle. I realized something then. Sophie had woken up a part of me that grief had buried, the part that protected my family, my peace, my dignity. The part Benjamin trusted. As I sipped my tea, I imagined Sophie laughing to herself, thinking she had outsmarted an old widow, thinking she had stripped me of every memory, thinking she would benefit from something she never lifted a finger to build. Bless her heart. She had no idea what storm was coming, and I had no intention of warning her. I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear or grief or the usual hollow ache Benjamin left behind, but because my mind was alive again. It had been months since I felt anything so electric. I kept the envelope on the nightstand beside me, touching it every so often just to remind myself it was real, that Benjamin's planning was real, that the security he built for me was real, and that Sophie's triumph was not. I got up before dawn, pulled on Benjamin's old flannel robe, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. The house felt different now. Not larger, not brighter, but somehow sturdier, as if it had inhaled with me, as if it had been holding its breath this whole time. I put on a pot of coffee the same way Benjamin used to, 2 scoops too many, exactly how he liked it. And while the machine hissed and popped, I spread the documents across the table. The cabin deed, company filings, bank certificates, tax records, investment summaries, and of course, Hale Timber and Trust. I traced my finger across Benjamin's signature, steady, confident, unmistakably his. He'd always been the quiet planner in our marriage. While I worried about grocery lists, leaky faucets, and whether Mark was reading at grade level, Benjamin thought decades ahead. He saved every spare dollar, made repairs with his own hands instead of paying someone, and believed that a family's strength lives in the foundation you build long before anything goes wrong. I never understood what he meant until now. I opened the binder containing the trust documents. The first page alone took my breath away. Assets held by Hale Timber and Trust, the mountain cabin and surrounding acreage, a small parcel of timberland near the Oregon border, a renovated duplex Benjamin purchased quietly 20 years ago, multiple investment accounts labeled Emergency Future Fund, L. Hale, a life insurance payout I never even knew existed, debt-free titles to every property. My throat tightened. For years, decades even, I'd believed Benjamin's firefighter salary barely kept us afloat. I clipped coupons budgeted around sales-stretched meals through weekends and made do with hand-me-downs. But Benjamin, he had been gathering acorns for the long winter of our lives. He had been preparing for a world without him in it, a world where I'd need strength he knew I didn't believe I had. I wiped a tear away before it could fall onto the documents. The cabin listed in bold black letters under the trust stung the deepest. The cabin wasn't just a property, it was Benjamin's sanctuary, his pride, his refuge from the harsh things he witnessed as a firefighter. It was where he healed, where we healed together, where Mark learned to skip stones and tie fishing knots, where Benjamin carved both our initials into the porch beam pretending he was marking Kilroy, was here because he thought it was funny. It was where we dreamed of growing old. And now Sophie claimed she had sold it. Sophie, I whispered, tasting bitterness on my tongue, you have no idea what you did. The phone buzzed on the table, making me jump. It was a text from Mark. Mom, can we talk later today? Sophie's upset. Something's happening with the cabin sale. Not sure what. Please call me. I stared at the screen, feeling old anger stir. Anger I had never let myself express. Mark had always been a good boy, a sweet boy, a loving boy. But when he married Sophie, something shifted. He dimmed himself to let her shine. Not because she deserved it. God knows she never earned that kind of devotion, but because he loved too kindly, too blindly, and I paid the price more than once for it. Not this time. I typed slowly. I have things to take care of today, Mark. We'll talk soon. Polite, vague, controlled. Then I placed my phone face down and returned to the documents. I needed to understand every corner of this trust before I made a move. Sophie was reckless, but she wasn't stupid. She had been circling the cabin for years, dropping hints like, Mark and I could use that money for the down payment, or that land is sitting there unused, or you're not getting any younger. Linda. I always brushed it off with a smile or a change of subject, but she must have taken my silence as permission. She never asked again. She didn't have to. She simply acted. But the funny thing about people like Sophie is that they assume everyone else is as uninformed as they are bold. They never imagine someone might know more, hold more leverage, or be protected in ways they can't see. Benjamin protected me, even from her. The next page of the binder made me stop breathing for a moment. Successor authority. Upon Benjamin Hale's death, all managerial and ownership rights transfer directly to Linda Hale, effective immediately. It was notarized, filed, ironclad. I was the sole owner of everything Sophie believed she had taken. I leaned back in my chair, my pulse steadying. A sense of calm washed through me, not triumphant, not smug, just certain. Certain that this was my moment to stop letting others decide my worth, to stop letting grief pin me to the floor, to stop being the quiet, agreeable mother-in-law Sophie thought she could walk over. I would not yell, I would not threaten, I would not beg. I would simply act. The sun rose slowly through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow across the papers. Dust floated like tiny flecks of gold in the air. For years I had started mornings in silence, feeling Benjamin's absence like a missing limb. But today the silence felt like possibility. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. I froze. Only one person knocked like that, quick, impatient, sharp. My stomach tightened. Sophie. I didn't move at first. The knocking grew harder. Linda opened the door. Her voice shrill and panicked. I gathered the documents, calmly slid them back into the envelope, and tucked it beneath the seat cushion of the dining chair, an old habit from when Mark was young and used to snoop for Christmas gifts. I smoothed my robe, steadied my breathing, and walked to the door. Linda. I unlocked it and pulled it open. Sophie stood there with wild eyes, hair unbrushed, shoes, mismatched the picture of a woman whose plans had begun to unravel. "We need to talk," she snapped. For the first time in a long time, I met her gaze without flinching. "Yes," I said softly, "we do." She didn't notice the calm in my voice. She didn't notice the shift in me. She had no idea what was coming next. Sophie pushed past me the moment I opened the door, storming into my living room like she owned it. Her perfume, sharp floral, overwhelming, filled the space immediately. She always wore too much of it, as if drowning herself in fragrance could hide the sourness of her intentions. She spun toward me, eyes blazing. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" "The buyers pulled out. They said some lawyer contacted them and told them the sale wasn't valid." Her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before, somewhere between anger and fear. I kept my face neutral. "Is that so?" "Don't play dumb, Linda." She threw her arms up. "You must have done something. Who did you talk to?" I walked calmly to the kitchen counter and wiped an imaginary crumb with the corner of a dish towel. I liked that towel. It had little blue robins on it. Benjamin bought it for me during our weekend trip to Claremont. "I didn't do anything, dear," I said softly. "You can't sell what you don't own." She froze. Just like that, her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes flicked over my face, searching, evaluating, calculating. Sophie always fancied herself clever, but she never knew where to look for real leverage. "What does that mean?" she asked slowly. "It means," I said, folding the towel neatly, "you should sit down." What? Why?" "Sit, Sophie." She obeyed. That was the first shift, the first crack in the power she believed she held. She sank onto my couch, hands trembling. Her nails, usually long, lacquered, expensive, were chipped at the edges. She'd been biting them. Good. That meant reality was finally seeping in. I took my time making tea. She watched every movement, the spoonful of honey, the slow swirl, the clink of the ceramic cup as I placed it on the table. Not for her, just for me. "You've been very busy," I finally said, easing myself into the armchair opposite her. "Selling my cabin, selling my car, deciding what I didn't need." It must have taken weeks of planning. She blinked rapidly. "Linda, I can explain." "Of course you can." I sipped my tea. "But I'm not asking for an explanation." Her breath shuddered. "Then what are you asking for?" "The truth." A long silence stretched between us, thick as fog. She swallowed. Once, twice. Finally, she whispered, "We needed the money." I repeated. Sophie's lips pressed together in a tight line. She glanced away, staring at a framed picture of Benjamin and me on the mantel, him in his firefighter uniform, me in my Sunday dress, both smiling like fools. "Mark's business isn't doing well," she muttered. "We're drowning Linda. The house, the loans, the investments, everything is bleeding us dry." I thought, the cabin was just sitting there, wasted. I thought if we sold it. "You would save yourselves," I finished for her. She nodded miserably. "And not once," I said, "did you consider calling me first." Her eyes filled with tears she did not deserve. "I thought you wouldn't understand. I thought you'd say no. So instead of asking, you took..." She flinched. I let her sit with that. Let her feel it. Let it settle deep and sharp like a splinter under her skin. She shifted uncomfortably, pulling her cardigan tighter. "Linda, the buyers threatened to sue us. The agent says we forged ownership papers. They say we committed fraud. We could lose everything." "You might," I said quietly. She stiffened. "Aren't you going to help us?" "I'm thinking." She stared at me with a mix of shock and panic. In all the years she'd been married to Mark, she'd grown accustomed to me smoothing things over, swallowing things down, apologizing for things I hadn't done just to keep the peace. Women of my generation had been trained that way, trained to carry the weight of the family like a silent mule. But not today. Not anymore. Sophie took a shaky breath. "Linda, please. We have nowhere else to turn." I set my tea down gently, folded my hands, and looked her dead in the eye. You sold my cabin without hesitation. You sold my car. You treated me like someone who didn't matter, like someone who wasn't worth the decency of a conversation. She wiped her cheek. I know, and I'm sorry. But her sorry felt like sawdust, dry, thin, and weightless. I stood up, walked to the window, and parted the curtains. Outside, the morning sunlight touched the maple trees gently, their leaves trembling in a soft breeze. Everything looked so calm, so peaceful, so unlike the storm building in my living room. A lawyer contacted your buyers because the sale was illegal, I said. Sophie gasped. So you did do something. I didn't, I corrected, but someone else did. Who? I turned to face her, let her see every ounce of the truth she wasn't ready for. Benjamin. Her mouth fell open. Your husband, but he's gone. He left things behind, I said. Documents, plans, protection. Her face went pale. It isn't your place to know everything yet, I continued. But hear me, Sophie. Whatever you thought you sold, whatever you believed you could take, you were mistaken. Her voice trembled. Are you going to tell Mark? Not yet. Are you going to tell the police? Not yet. She pressed her palms to her temples. Linda, I messed up. I know I messed up. But I swear we only did it because we're broke. Please just tell me what you want from me. I looked at her, the woman who had spent years criticizing my furniture, mocking my recipes, calling my home quaint in that snide way she thought was charming. The woman who had convinced my son that I needed supervision, that I was fragile and incapable and slow. And now she needed me. Life is funny that way. You can leave, I said, or you can stay and learn. Learn, she echoed. Yes, I said softly. Learn what it feels like to take responsibility. Learn what it feels like to rebuild. Learn how to stand without stepping on others. Learn who you are when you're not pretending. And if I stay, then you stay with rules. Her voice cracked. What rules? You don't ask questions you're not ready to hear answers to. You don't take anything that isn't yours. And you don't speak to me. I leaned in slightly with anything other than respect. Sophie swallowed hard. And if I agree, she whispered. Then I said, you may stay. She nodded slowly, tears streaking her cheeks. Okay, she breathed. I'll stay. Of course she would. Sophie had nowhere else to go. And she didn't realize yet that staying was exactly what I needed her to do. Because the double life I was about to lead depended on one thing. Keeping my enemy close. Very close. Sophie didn't move in that day. Pride wouldn't let her. She left my house stiff-backed and stiff-necked, clutching her designer handbag like it was a life raft. But the cracks were there, the tremor in her hands, the way her shoulders sagged when she thought I wasn't looking. She had always walked like she was on a runway. That morning, she walked like someone trying not to fall. For a few days, the only proof that the world outside my front yard still existed were the neighborhood whispers. Meredith, my neighbor of 30 years, came by with a casserole and a head full of news. She always brought both. Linda, honey, did you hear? She said, barely crossing the threshold before launching into it. That mountain cabin sale your daughter-in-law bragged about fell through. Whole thing's a mess. Folks at the coffee shop say the buyers are furious. Something about fraudulent documents. I kept my expression mild. Is that so? She nodded vigorously. They're threatening to sue Mark and Sophie, and rumor has it she lowered her voice as if the curtains had ears. They're already months behind on their mortgage, car loan, credit cards, everything. That girl's been playing rich with other people's money. I stirred the sugar into my tea. People eventually have to pay for what they spend, I said, one way or another. Meredith sighed. You always did have a way of saying things nicely and still making them sound like a warning. I smiled faintly. Maybe they are. Later that afternoon, I watched from the kitchen window as Sophie stood in her driveway arguing with a man in a suit. His gestures were sharp, impatient. She clutched a folder of papers to her chest like a shield. Mark wasn't there. He'd started staying late at work, then crashing at a friend's place because things are tense at home right now, Mom. That's what he told me in a short-clipped phone call I hadn't asked for. I saw the suit man jab a finger toward the house. Sophie nodded, her face pale. When he left, she sank onto the front step, dropped her head into her hands, and stayed like that for a long time. Pride can't keep you warm forever. 3 nights later, there was a knock at my door. Not sharp and impatient this time, but hesitant. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. I knew who it was before I opened it. Sophie stood on the porch with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box. Her eyes were swollen. Her makeup, usually pristine, was smudged at the corners. The expensive coat she wore looked suddenly smaller on her, as if the weight on her shoulders had grown heavier than the price tag. "Linda," she said, voice raw, "please." I stepped aside without making her beg. Some lessons don't require cruelty. Life had already handled that part. She dragged her things inside and set them near the couch, looking around as if seeing my home for the first time. Not as a place to judge, but as a place to survive. I watched her gaze linger on the Afghan draped over the back of the chair, the ceramic rooster on the shelf, the faded family photos on the wall. "It's quiet here," she whispered. "It is," I said. "Sit down. You look like you haven't slept." She collapsed onto the couch, hands twisting in her lap. For a moment she didn't speak. Then the words started pouring out, rapid and breathless, like water through a cracked dam. "The buyers pulled out. They're demanding their money back. The agent wants her commission anyway. The bank says if we don't catch up on the mortgage, they'll start foreclosure. Mark's business partner bailed. Clients are suing. Our credit cards are maxed. My car got repossessed yesterday." And her voice broke. "Mark left." I kept my tone steady. "Left how?" She stared at the floor. "He said he needed space to think." Took a bag and went to stay with his childhood friend Tom. He turned off his phone. I haven't heard from him in 2 days. I felt a flash of anger toward my son, not because he was overwhelmed, but because he had abandoned the fire he helped start, just like Sophie had done to me months ago with that cold phone call. "Did he know what you were doing with the cabin?" I asked. She hesitated. "Not exactly. I told him I was talking to a realtor about options. He signed some papers, but I didn't explain everything. I thought he'd just say no and then we'd still be stuck. So I handled it. And now everything's falling apart," she whispered. "Everyone wants something from me. The bank, the lawyer, the buyers, the credit card companies, Mark, and you." I raised an eyebrow. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "You want an apology. You deserve one. I know what I did was wrong. I know I treated you like a problem to solve instead of family." Her voice shook. "I don't even know when I became that person." I watched her carefully. This wasn't the dramatic remorse she trotted out when she'd been caught gossiping or overspending. This was different, rawer, quieter, as if she was speaking less to me and more to herself. "You became that person one choice at a time," I said gently, "just like the rest of us." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I don't have anywhere else to go, Linda." The landlord changed the locks. Some man taped a notice to the door, something about default and repossession. I'm scared. Fear stripped away the arrogance. Fear turned her from the intimidating daughter-in-law who mocked my curtains into a scared woman who had finally reached the bottom of the well. Rock bottom. "Well," I said softly, "rock bottom has a guest room." She blinked. "What?" "You can stay," I said, "in Mark's old bedroom, but the rules we discussed still stand. Respect, honesty, no more taking what wasn't hers." She nodded quickly. "I'll do anything. I'll help with groceries, with cleaning." I raised a hand. "We'll figure the rest out as we go. For now, you need sleep. And then—" I sighed. "Then you need a job." Her mouth fell open a little. "A job." "Yes," I said calmly. "Money won't appear from thin air, and you can't fix all this by selling what doesn't belong to you." She almost smiled, a sad, crooked thing. "I've never had a real job, Linda. Not since before Mark and I got married. I've done some part-time stuff, some online courses, a bit of consulting, but you're gonna learn," I said. The next week was an education for us both. During the day, I watch Sophie sit at my dining table, laptop open, applying for anything and everything: receptionist, cashier, hotel, housekeeper, grocery clerk. She walked to every shop within a mile radius, clutching printed resumes that suddenly felt too thin. Most said no. Some smiled politely. A few didn't even look up. I saw her come home those first few days with blistered feet and a defeated slump to her shoulders. Once she sat on the porch steps and stared at her hands for a full 10 minutes, as if she didn't recognize them without a manicure. Then on the fourth day, she came in with a small flicker of something in her eyes. "I got a job," she said, voice oddly small. "What kind?" "Stocking shelves at the grocery store," she answered. "Nights, part-time." "Honest work," I said. "Nothing wrong with that." She nodded. "It's minimum wage." And they asked if I could lift heavy boxes. I lied and said yes. I guess I'll have to figure out how. That night, I watched her lace up an old pair of sneakers she'd probably once considered yard shoes and head out into the dark. When she came back, it was close to midnight. She moved slowly, shoulders sore, hands red. "How was it?" I asked. "Hard," she said. Then after a pause, "But the women there, they were kind. One of them, a single mom named Clara, showed me how to stack the cans so they don't topple. She's been doing it for 10 years. She laughed when I dropped a box and said, 'Welcome to the club.'" I nodded. Good. Sophie sank into a chair and exhaled. "Do you ever think about how much you didn't see when you had everything?" "All the time," I said quietly. Days spilled into weeks. She worked nights, slept mornings, and spent afternoons on hold with creditors and banks trying to negotiate, explain, plead. I heard words like collections default settlement and liability more than I cared to. Sometimes she'd hang up and laugh, a brittle, humorless sound. Sometimes she'd cry quietly in the bathroom, thinking I couldn't hear. I heard everything. One evening, as she sorted through a stack of bills at my table, she said, "They don't care, you know. The banks, the companies, they don't care if you were tricked or if you trusted the wrong person. They just want their money." "No," I said. "They don't care." She swallowed. "I always thought people who lost their homes were just irresponsible, lazy, making excuses." Her fingers tightened around a bill. "Now I see it's not that simple. Understanding is a slow, painful light." Later that night, when she'd gone to her shift, the phone rang. I picked it up. "Mrs. Hale," a familiar voice said, "It's Caldwell." My spine straightened. "Good evening, Mr. Caldwell. I've completed the deeper review of Mark and Sophie's finances, and there's more you need to know." I closed my eyes. I figured as much. "Would you like to come in tomorrow morning?" he asked. "There are some options we can discuss, legal options, and others." "Yes," I said, glancing down the hallway toward the room where Sophie's suitcases lay half unpacked. I think it's time I understood everything. Because if I was going to decide how far to let Sophie fall, I needed to see just how deep the pit really was. Caldwell's office sat on the third floor of an old brick building downtown, the kind of place where the elevator creaks and the hallway lights flicker just enough to make you wonder if it's intentional. I'd been there twice before, once with Benjamin years ago when we were rewriting our wills, and once more recently when the cabin fiasco began. But that morning, as I pushed open the heavy glass door, something felt different. Mrs. Hale Caldwell said, rising from behind his desk. He always greeted me like a school principal greeting a student who'd come prepared. "Thank you for coming." "You said there were new findings," I replied, settling into the leather chair across from him. He nodded and folded his hands. "I did, and I think we need to proceed carefully." That was never a comforting sentence. He slid a folder toward me. I opened it slowly. Inside were papers, dozens of them. Loan applications, credit statements, tax documents. Some were neat copies, others were grainy printouts, but all bore signatures. Sophie's, I guessed. "Not exactly," he said. "Some are hers, some are Mark's, some appear to be both." Appear? My stomach tightened. "What are you trying to say?" Mrs. Hale, your son and daughter-in-law were in trouble long before the cabin. Their financial crisis didn't start this year. It didn't even start last year. It began 4 years ago. 4 years. My voice was quieter than I intended. Yes, and they've been hiding it from you. He pointed to one particular document, a loan agreement with an interest rate so predatory it made my skin crawl. Here's where it started, he said. Mark took out a business loan to expand his workshop. Sophie co-signed. It didn't go well. From there, they fell behind. They refinanced their house, took out credit lines, consolidated debt, reconsolidated that same debt, drew from retirement accounts, then drew from the penalties of drawing from retirement accounts, and still never told me. I murmured. Caldwell's face softened. They were ashamed, Mrs. Hale, and desperation makes people foolish or dishonest. I closed the folder. How bad is it? Bad, he admitted, but recoverable, if they had steady income and made responsible choices. He paused. I caught the hesitation. There's more. Yes, he said, there is. He handed me another paper, this one thinner, almost like a printout from an old bank machine. This, he said grimly, is a withdrawal slip. 3 months ago, Sophie took out $12,000 from an account in Mark's name. That doesn't sound unusual, I said carefully. They're married. Except Caldwell continued the account had originally been opened by Benjamin, years ago. He set it up for Mark as a safety fund, a separate account, something he could use for emergencies, something he explicitly asked you not to touch, something he intended for Mark and only Mark. The room seemed to shift. I swallowed. She drained it. Yes, down to $14, and based on what I've traced, the money wasn't used for bills. His eyes met mine. It was used for something else. What? He slid one final paper toward me. A receipt. A flight itinerary. 2 round-trip tickets to Cancun. For Sophie and a man whose name was absolutely not my son's. My breath caught. She had an affair. Caldwell nodded once slowly. It appears so. I stared at the receipt as if it might dissolve. The cheap ink glared up at me. The date was clear, the destination unmistakable, the betrayal written in block font. That trip had occurred 2 months before the phone call where she'd cheerfully informed me she'd sold my cabin and car. Why are you just telling me this now? I whispered. Because I needed proof, Caldwell said, and because I needed you to understand the entire picture before you decided what to do. You deserve the truth, Mrs. Hale, without dilution. Truth can be heavier than lies. And this truth felt like lead. I need some air, I said. He nodded. Take your time, and Mrs. Hale. Yes. Whatever you decide, you have more leverage than you realize. Outside, the sky was gray and heavy, threatening rain. People hurried across the crosswalks with umbrellas tucked under their arms. I walked slowly, letting the cold air clear my thoughts. My son's marriage was more broken than I'd realized. My daughter-in-law's betrayal ran deeper than money. And Sophie was sleeping in my guest room, by choice or by consequence. When I got home, the house was quiet. Sophie's shoes were by the door, her cheap canvas sneakers with frayed laces, the only ones she owned now. I found her in the kitchen, hunched over a stack of paperwork. She looked exhausted. Not dramatic, exhausted, real exhausted. Her hair was tied back sloppily, and she wore one of Mark's oversized sweatshirt sleeves hanging past her fingers. Morning, she mumbled without looking up. Sophie, I said softly, we need to talk. She lifted her head, sensing something in my tone. Is it about the bills? I know I'm behind on some payments, but I'm calling everyone today to try to... No, I said gently, not the bills. Her brow furrowed. What is it? I sat across from her. She watched me as if bracing for impact. And it struck me then, not everything Caldwell uncovered needed to be used as a weapon. Not every truth needed to be spoken to the person already bleeding. At least, not yet. We're going to see Caldwell tomorrow, I said instead. He has information we both need to hear. Fear flashed behind her eyes. Am I in trouble? In trouble, I echoed. Yes, but not beyond saving. Her shoulders trembled. Mark hasn't answered my messages. And I think he's blaming me for everything. But I swear, Linda, I swear I didn't mean for it to go this far." Her voice cracked. "I know," I said. And I did. Even if she didn't deserve grace yet, she deserved the chance to earn it. "We'll handle things one step at a time," I told her. She nodded, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Thank you. I mean it. I know I don't deserve your help. I know I screwed everything up, but I'm going to fix it. I have to." I studied her carefully, the slumped shoulders, the trembling hands, the exhaustion in her eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. For the first time, I wondered, was she evil, or was she simply weak? And which one was I planning to teach her not to be? The next morning arrived cold and crisp, the kind of morning that made the house creak softly, as if it were stretching its old bones. I found Sophie sitting at the dining table again, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she wasn't drinking. Her eyes were puffy from lack of sleep or crying, though she'd never admit the latter. "Ready?" I asked. She nodded, though she clearly wasn't. We drove to Caldwell's office in silence. Sophie fidgeted with the sleeve of her sweatshirt the entire way, tugging at a loose thread until it unraveled into a long, curling tail. I didn't stop her. Anxiety needs somewhere to go. Better a thread than a scream. Inside the office, Caldwell greeted her with the same calm professionalism he always had. But Sophie looked at him like he was the executioner, and she'd just walked onto the scaffold. "Mrs. Hale, Miss Hale," he said, directing us to the chairs. "Please sit." Sophie lowered herself cautiously into the seat beside me, fingers interlaced so tightly her knuckles turned white. Caldwell opened a folder. "Before we begin," he said carefully, "I want to make one thing clear. What we discuss today does not leave this room unless you choose to take legal action." Sophie swallowed. "Legal action." "Against the creditors," Caldwell said. "Against those who wronged you." "And against yourself," he added silently with his eyes, though he didn't say it aloud. I glanced at Sophie. Her throat bobbed as she nodded. Caldwell continued, "You two have endured an extremely complicated financial situation, most of it stemming from decisions made under stress, some of it stemming from decisions made in desperation." My jaw tightened. He wasn't wrong. Then he turned to Sophie. "And some of it, Ms. Hale, stemming from decisions made without honesty." Sophie's face drained of all color. What does that mean?" "Oh, Caldwell, you always did drop the blade without warning." I placed a hand on his arm. "Start with the manageable parts," I said quietly. "The things she needs to know first." He understood. "Very well," he said, shifting gears. "Ms. Hale, the good news is that your creditors can be negotiated with. Your debts are not insurmountable. And thanks to documentation we've obtained, you won't lose your mother-in-law's home, nor will the banks be able to come after her." Sophie gasped. They can't take the house." "No," he said, "because this house was never in your name and Mrs. Hale legally owns it outright." I saw her shoulders slump with relief. For the first time in weeks, she exhaled fully. But Caldwell wasn't finished. "Your husband," he continued carefully, "has misrepresented certain financial disclosures and left you exposed to a number of liabilities. You'll need to file a formal separation before any additional debts can be legally tied to you." Sophie nodded with a trembling chin. I figured. "And you'll have to provide statements verifying which lines of credit were opened without your consent." Another nod, smaller this time. "Now," Caldwell said, turning the page that brings us to the rest. I saw Sophie brace herself back, straightening fingers digging into her palms. Caldwell hesitated for a moment as if choosing his words. Then he looked at me. "Mrs. Hale," he said gently, "would you prefer to explain this part?" I inhaled deeply. Looked at Sophie. Saw the fractured pieces of a woman who had spent months building her own downfall piece by piece, choice by choice, lie by lie. She deserved the truth, but she also deserved to survive it. "No," I said quietly, "I'll explain the rest at home." Caldwell nodded and closed the folder. "Then my work here is done for now. Come back next week to begin the legal filings." We left the office. The drive home was silent except for the occasional shaky breath from the passenger seat. When we pulled into the driveway, Sophie didn't move. She just stared ahead, hands limp in her lap. "Linda," she whispered. "What did he mean? What didn't he tell me?" I turned off the car. "You should come inside." She followed me into the house slowly, like someone walking toward a truth that might break her. I sat at the dining table first, folding my hands. She sat across from me, eyes wide, bracing for impact. And I told her. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. Enough for her to understand the weight of her actions. Enough for her to understand why the cabin sale failed. Enough for her to understand that Benjamin had left protections in place she never knew existed. Enough for her to understand that she had betrayed the trust of the very people who would have helped her without being asked. Her face went pale, her voice cracked, her body trembled. There's a particular kind of silence people make when their own reflection becomes too honest. She made that silence now. "Linda," she choked, I don't know how to fix any of this." "You don't fix it all at once," I said softly. "You fix it one day at a time, one choice at a time." She covered her face with both hands, not a dramatic gesture, a human one, a broken one. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered through her fingers. "I don't deserve it." "No," I said gently, "you don't." Her hands slowly lowered. "But you can earn it," I added, "if you choose to." She blinked, tears clinging to her lashes. "How?" "By becoming better than the choices you made, by learning, by changing, by growing, by becoming someone you wouldn't be ashamed to meet." She let out a sob, not loud but deep, the kind that comes from the bottom of a person's history. I moved around the table and placed a hand on her shoulder. It was stiff at first, then slowly softened under my touch. "You've hit bottom," I said quietly, "but bottom is not the end. It's the place where people build foundations." She nodded against a trembling breath. "I'll try, I swear I'll try." "I know," I said. "That's why you're still here." She wiped her face and took a long, shaky breath. "What happens now?" Now I smiled gently. Now we rebuild. Weeks later, life didn't become perfect. It just became honest. Sophie kept her job. She even got moved to daytime shifts eventually. Neighbors began nodding kindly to her again, not out of pity but respect. Mark returned, once tried to talk, but left when Sophie told him calmly and firmly that she wasn't going backward. Not for him. Not for herself. One afternoon, as we folded laundry together, she looked over at me and said softly, "Linda, I know we may never be what we once pretended to be, but I hope someday we can be something real." I looked at her, really looked at her, the person, not the shadow of the person she'd been. And I nodded. We already are. If you stayed with me through this entire journey, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where are you listening from? What would you have done in my place? Your comments are what keep these stories alive. And if you enjoy emotional real-life journeys like this one, make sure to subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Thank you for being here, for feeling this story with me, and for sharing your time and heart.